Hello everyone, we're here in the Irish Embassy in Singapore for the Global Bloomsday gathering, and a group of us will be continuing with a reading of Ulysses around the world. My name is Nithya and I have just graduated from the English department in NTU. Following me, there will be Sameera, a master's student at NTU English Division currently writing her thesis on Ulysses. After her will be Crispin Rodrigues, a master's student also at NTU and is a performance poet on the side. After him, we will have Nathan, a student at Tanglin Trust School Singapore with a keen interest in drama, literature, and the classics. After Nathan, we will have Derek, a senior lecturer in the English department, St. Patrick's College, Drumcondra. Following him, we will have Angela, a senior lecturer in New York University's Expository writing program. And lastly, we will have Victoria, an undergraduate student at NTU. She majors in English. I will now commence with the reading. Know me, a father, Stephen said. Battling against hopelessness is a necessary evil. He wrote the play in the months that followed his father's death. If you hold that he, a greying man with 2 marriageable daughters, with 35 years of life, nel mezzo del camin di nostra vita, with 50 of experience, is the beardless undergraduate from Wittenberg, then you must hold that his 70-year-old mother is the lustful queen. No, the corpse of John Shakespeare does not walk the night. From hour to hour, it rots and rots. He rests, disarmed of fatherhood, having devised that mystical estate upon his son. Boccaccio's Calandrino was the first and last man who felt himself with child. Fatherhood, in the sense of conscious begetting, is unknown to man. It is a mystical estate, an apostolic succession from only begetter to only begotten. On that mystery and not on the Madonna which the cunning Italian intellect flung to the mob of Europe, the Church is founded and founded irremovably because founded, like the world, macro and microcosm, upon the void. Upon incertitude, upon unlikelihood, amor matris, subjective and objective genitive, may be the only true thing in life. Paternity may be a legal fiction. Who is the father of any son that any son should love him or he any son? What the hell are you driving at? I know, shut up. Blast you. I have reasons. Amplius, ad hoc, interim, posterior. Are you condemned to do this? They are sundered by a bodily shame so steadfast that the criminal annals of the world, stained with all other incests and bestialities, hardly record its breach. Sons with mothers, sires with daughters, lesbic sisters, loves that dare not speak their name, nephews with grandmothers, jailbirds with keyholes, queens with prize bulls. The son unborn mars beauty. Born, he brings pain, divides affection, increases care. He is a male. His growth is his father's decline. His youth, his father's envy. His friend, his father's enemy. In rue, Monsieur le Prince, I thought it. What links them in nature? An instant of blind rut. Am I a father? If I were, shrunken, uncertain hand. Sabellius, the African subtlest heresiarch of all the beasts of the field, held that the father was himself his own son. The bulldog of Equine, with whom no word shall be impossible, refutes him. Well, if the father who has not a son be not a father, can the son who has not a father be a son? When Rutland, Bacon, Southampton, Shakespeare, or another poet of the same name in the Comedy of Errors wrote Hamlet, he was not the father of his own son merely but, being no more a son, he was, and felt himself the father of all his race, the father of his own grandfather, the father of his unborn grandson, who, by the same token, never was born for nature, as Mr. McGee understands her, abhors perfection. Eglinton eyes, quick with pleasure, looked up shy brightly. Gladly glancing, a merry Puritan, through the twisted eglantine. Flatter, rarely but flatter. Himself, his own father, son Mulligan told himself. Wait, I am big with child. I have an unborn child in my brain. Pallas Athena. A play. The play's the thing. Let me parturiate. He clasped his paunch brow with both birth-hating hands. As for his family, Stephen said, his mother's name lives in the forest of Arden. Her death brought from him the scene with Volumnia in Coriolanus. His boy son's death is the death scene of young Arthur in King John. Hamlet the Black Prince is Hamlet Shakespeare. Who the girls in The Tempest, in Pericles, in Winter's Tale are we know. Who Cleopatra, fleshpot of Egypt, and Cressid, and Venus are we may guess. But there is another member of this family who is recorded. The plot thickens, John Eglinton said. The Quaker librarian, quaking, tiptoed in, quake, his mask, quake, with haste, quake, quack. Door closed, cell, day. They list, 3, they. Are you, he, they? Come, miss. Stephen. He had 3 brothers, Gilbert, Edmund, Richard. Gilbert, in his old age, told some cavaliers he got a pass from Maester Gatherer one time mass he did, and he had seen his brute maester roll the playwright upon in London in a wrestling play with a man on's back. The playhouse sausage filled Gilbert's soul. He is nowhere, but an Edmund and a Richard are recorded in the works of Sweet William. Maggie Glenjohn. Names. What's in a name? Best. That is my name, Richard, don't you know? I hope you're going to say a good word for Richard, don't you know, for my sake. Buck Mulligan, piano diminuendo. Then outspoke Medical Dick, to his comrade Medical Davy. Stephen. In his trinity of black whales, the villain shakebags, Iago, Richard Crookback, Edmund in King Lear, 2 bear the wicked uncle's names. Nay, that last play was written or being written while his brother Edmund lay dying in Southwark. Best. I hope Edmund is going to catch it. I don't want Richard, my name. Quaker Lister, a tempo. But he that filches from me my good name. Stephen, stringendo. He has hidden his own name, a fair name, William, in the place. A super here, a clown there, as a painter of old Italy set his face in a dark corner of his canvas. He has revealed it in the sonnets where there is will in overplus. Like John O'Gaunt, his name is dear to him, as dear as the coat of arms he toadied for. On a bent sable, a spear, a steeled argent, honorific abilitu dignitantibus. Dearer than his glory of greatest shake scene in the country. What's in a name? That is what we ask ourselves in childhood when we write the name that we are told is ours. A star, a day star, a fire-draped rose at his birth. It shone by day in the heavens alone, brighter than Venus in the night, and by night it shone over Delta in Cassiopeia, the recumbent constellation which is the signature of his initial among the stars. His eyes watched it, lolling on the horizon, eastward of the Bear, as he walked by the slumberous summer fields at midnight, returning from Shottery and from her arms. Both satisfied, I too. Don't tell them he was 9 years old when it was quenched, and from her arms. Wait to be wooed and won. I, Nikop, who will woo you? Read the skies, Auton, Timor, Rumenos. Bus, Stephonomenos. Where's your configuration? Stephen, cut the bread even. SD, Suadonna, Gia, Delu, Galindo, resolve, de non amar SD. What is that, Mr. Daedalus? The Quaker librarian asked. What is a celestial phenomenon? A star by night, Stephen said, a pillar of the cloud by day. What's more to speak? Stephen looked on his hat, his stick, his boots. Stephanus, my crown, my sword. His boots are spoiling the shape of my feet. Buy a pair, holes in my socks, handkerchief too. You make good use of the name. John Eglinton aloud. Your own name is strange enough. I suppose it explains your fantastical humor. Me, McGee, and Mulligan. Fabulous artificer, the hawk-like man. You flew? Where to? New Haven, Dieppe. Steerage passenger. Paris and back. Lapwing. Icarus. Pater, I. Sea bedabbled. Fallen. Weltering. Lapwing you are. Lapwing be. Mr. Best eager quietly lifted his book to say, That's very interesting, because that brother motive, don't you know, we find also in the old Irish myths. Just what you say, the
Three Brothers Shakespeare. In Grimm too, don't you know, the fairy tales? The third brother that marries the sleeping beauty and wins the best prize. Best of best brothers, good, better, best. The Quaker librarian spring halted near. I should like to know, he said, which brother I understand you to suggest there was misconduct with one of the brothers, but perhaps I am anticipating? He caught himself in the act, looked at all, refrained. An attendant from the doorway called, Mr. Leicester, Father Deneen wants... Oh, Father Deneen, directly. Swiftly, rectly, creaking, rectly, he was rectly gone. John Eglinton touched the foil. Come, he said, let us hear what you have to say of Richard and Edmund. You kept them for the last, didn't you? In asking you to remember those two noble kinsmen, Nuncle Richie and Nuncle Edmund, Stephen answered, I feel I am asking too much, perhaps. A brother is as easily forgotten as an umbrella. Lapwing. Where is your brother? Apothecaries' hall, my whetstone, him, then Cranley, Mulligan. Now these. Speech, but act speech. They mock to try you, act, be acted on. Lapwing. I am tired of my voice, the voice of Esau, my kingdom for a drink. On. You will say those names were already in the chronicles from which he took the stuff of his place. Why did he take them rather than others? Richard, a horse and crookback, misbegotten, makes love to a widowed Anne. What's in the name? Woos and wins her, a horse and merry widow. Richard the Conqueror, third brother, came after William the Conquered. The other four acts of that play hang limply from that first. Of all his kings, Richard is the only king unshielded by Shakespeare's reverence, the angel of the world. Why is the underplot of King Lear, in which Edmund figures, lifted out of Sidney's Arcadia and spatchcocked onto a Celtic legend older than history? That was Will's way, John Eglinton defended. We should not now combine a Norse saga with an excerpt from a novel by George Meredith. Que voulez-vous, Moore would say. He puts Bohemia on the seacoast and makes Ulysses quote Aristotle. Why? Stephen answered himself. Because the theme of the false or the usurping or the adulterous brother or all three in one is to Shakespeare what the poor is not, always with him. The note of banishment from the heart, banishment from home, sounds uninterruptedly from the two gentlemen of Verona, onward till Prospero breaks his staff, buries its certain fathoms in the earth and drowns his book. It doubles itself in the middle of his life, reflects itself in another, repeats itself, protasis, epitasis, catastasis, catastrophe. It repeats itself again when he is near the grave, when his married daughter Susan, chip of the old block, is accused of adultery. But it was the original sin that darkened his understanding, weakened his will, and left in him a strong inclination to evil. The words are those of my lords bishops of Maynooth, an original sin and, like original sin, committed by another in whose sin he too has sinned. It is between the lines of his last written words, it is petrified on his tombstone, under which her four bones are not to be laid. Age has not withered it. Beauty and peace have not done it away. It is in infinite variety everywhere in the world he has created, in Much Ado About Nothing, twice in As You Like It, in The Tempest, in Hamlet, in Measure for Measure, and in all the other plays which I have not read. He laughed to free his mind from his mind's bondage. Judge Eglinton summed up, The truth is midway, he affirmed. He is the ghost and the prince. He is all in all. He is, Stephen said. The boy of Act 1 is the mature man of Act 5. All in all. In Cymbeline, in Othello, he is bought and cuckolded. He acts and is acted on. Lover of an ideal or a perversion, like Jose, he kills the real Carmen. His unremitting intellect is the horn-mad Iago, ceaselessly willing that the more in him shall suffer. Cuckoo, cuckoo, Cuck Mulligan clucked lewdly. Oh, word of fear! Dark dome received, reverbed. And what a character is Iago, undaunted John Eglinton exclaimed. When all is said, duma fi, or is it duma per, is right. After God, Shakespeare has created most. Man delights him not, nor woman neither, Stephen said. He returns after a life of absence to that spot of earth where he was born, where he has always been, man and boy, a silent witness, and there, his journey of life ended. He plants his mulberry tree in the earth, then dies. The motion is ended. Gravediggers bury Hamlet père and Hamlet fille, a king and a prince at last in death with incidental music. And what though murdered and betrayed, bewept by all frail tender hearts for Dane or Dubliner, sorrow for the dead is the only husband from whom they refuse to be divorced. If you like the epilogue, look long on it. Prosperous Prospero, the good man rewarded, Lizzie, Grandpa's lump of love, and Nuncle Richie, the bad man taken off by poetic justice to the place where the bad niggers go. Strong curtain. He found in the world without as actual what was in his world within as possible. Maeterlinck says, if Socrates leave his house today, he will find the sage seated on his doorstep. If Judas go forth tonight, it is to Judas his steps will tend. Every life is many days, day after day. We walk through ourselves, meeting robbers, ghosts, giants, old men, young men, wives, widows, brothers in love, but always meeting ourselves. The playwright who wrote the folio of this world and wrote it badly, he gave us light first and the sun 2 days later, the Lord of things as they are, whom the most Roman of Catholics call it Dio Boia, hangman God, is doubtless all in all of us, ostler and butcher and would-be bought and cuckold too, but that in the economy of heaven, foretold by Hamlet, there are no more marriages, glorified man, an androgynous angel being a wife unto himself. Eureka, Buck Mulligan cried, Eureka! Suddenly happy, he jumped up and reached in a stride John Eglinton's desk. May I? He said. The Lord has spoken to Malachi. He began to scribble on a slip of paper. Take some slips from the counter going out. Those who are married, Mr. Best, Deuce, Harold, said, all save one shall live. The rest shall keep as they are. He laughed, unmarried, at Eglinton Johannes, of arts a bachelor. Unwed, unfancied, ware of wiles, they finger ponder nightly each his variorum edition of the Taming of the Shrew. You are a delusion, said roundly John Eglinton to Stephen. You have brought us all this way to show us a French triangle. Do you believe your own theory? No, Stephen said promptly. Are you going to write it? Mr. Best asked. You ought to make it a dialogue, don't you know, like the Platonic dialogues Wilde wrote. John Eclection doubly smiled. Well, in that case, he said, I don't see why you should expect payment for it since you don't believe it yourself. Dowden believes there is some mystery in Hamlet, but will say no more. Herr Bleibtreu, the man Piper met in Berlin, who is working up that Rutland theory, believes that the secret is hidden in the Stratford monument. He is going to visit the present Duke, Piper says, and prove to him that his ancestor wrote the plays. It will come as a surprise to his grace, but he believes his theory. I believe, O Lord, help my unbelief. That is, help me to believe, or help me to unbelieve. Who helps to believe? Eagleman. Who to unbelieve? Other chap. You are the only contributor to Dana who asked for pieces of silver. Then I don't know about the next number. Fred Ryan wants space for an article on economics. Fred Ryan, 2 pieces of silver he lent me. Tide you over. Economics. For a guinea, Stephen said, you can publish this interview.
Buck Mulligan stood up from his scribbling, laughing, and then gravely said, honeying malice. I called upon the bard Kinch at his summer residence in Upper Mecklenburg Street and found him deep in the study of Summa Contra Gentiles in the company of two gonorrheal ladies, Fresh Nelly and Rosalie, the cold keyhole. He broke away. Come, Kinch, come, wandering Angus of the birds. Come, Kinch, you have eaten all we left. I will serve you your arts and offals. Stephen rose. Life is many days. This will end. We shall see you tonight, John Eglinton said. Not Ami Morses. Malachi Mulligan must be there. Buck Mulligan flaunted his slip in Panama. Monsieur Moore, he said, lecturer on French letters to the youth of Ireland. I'll be there. Come, Kinch, the buds must drink. Can you walk straight? Laughing he, swill to 11, Irish night's entertainment. Lubber. Stephen followed a lubber. One day in the National Library, we had a discussion. Shakes. After his lub back, I followed. I gall his kibe. Stephen, greeting, then all amort. Followed a lubber jester, a well-kempt head, new bubbered, out of the vaulted cell into the shattering daylight of no thoughts. What have I learned? Of them, of me. Walk like Haynes now. The constant reader's room. In the reader's book, Cashel, Boyle, O'Connor, Fitzmaurice, Tisdall, Farrell, perhaps his polysyllables. Item, was Hamlet mad? The Quaker's pate got Lily with a pristine in book talk. Please do, sir, I shall be most pleased. Amused, Buck Mulligan mused in pleasant humour with himself, self-nodding. A pleased bottom. The turnstile. Is that? Blue ribboned hat, idly writing. What? Looked? The curving balustrade, smooth sliding Mincius. Puck Mulligan, Padma helmeted, when step by step I am being trolling. John Eglinton, my Joe, John, why won't you wear the wife? He spluttered into there. Oh, the chinless Chinaman, Chin Chong Eglinton. We went over to their playbox, Haynes and I, the Plumbers Hall. Our players are creating a new art for Europe, like the Greeks or M. Maeterlinck. Abbey Theatre. I smelled the public sweat of monks. He spat blank. Forgot, any more than he forgot the whipping lousy Lucy gave him. And he left the femme de 30 ans. And why no other children born? And his first child a girl. Afterwit. Go back. The dour recluse still there. He has his cake. And the douce youngling, minion of pleasure, Phaedo's toyable fair hair. I just wanted. I forgot. He. Longworth and McCurdy Atkinson were there. Puck Mulligan, footed, featly, trilling. I hardly hear the purlieu cry, or a Tommy talk as I pass one by, before my thoughts begin to run on F. McCurdy Atkinson, the same that had the wooden leg, and that filibustering filibag that never dared to slick his drouth. Maggie had that chinless mouth. Being afraid to marry on earth, they masturbated for all they were worth. Jeston, know thyself. Halted below me, a quizzer looks at me. I halt. Mournful murmur, Buck Mulligan moaned. Sing has left off wearing black to be like nature. Only crows, priests, and English coal are black. A laugh tripped over his lips. Longworth is awfully sick, he said, after what you wrote about that old Hick Gregory. Oh, you inquisitional drunken Jew Jesuit. She gets you a job on the paper and then you go and slate a drivel to Jesus. Why couldn't he do the Yeats touch? He went on and down, mopping, chanting with waving graceful arms. The most beautiful book that has come out of our country in my time. One thinks of Homer. He stopped at the stair foot.
I have conceived of a play for the mummers, he said solemnly. The pillared moorish hall, the shadows entwined. Gone the 9 men's morris with caps of indices. In sweetly varying voices, Buck Mulligan read his tablet. Every man his own wife, or a honeymoon in the hand, and national immorality in 3 orgasms, by Balaky Mulligan. He turned a happy patch's smirk to Stephen, saying, The disguise, I fear, is thin, but listen. He read Marcato. Characters: Toby Tostoff, a ruined Pole; Crab, a bushranger; Medical Dick and Medical Davy, 2 birds with 1 stone; Mother Grogan, a water carrier; Fresh Nelly and Rosalie, the cold key whore. He laughed, lolling a to and fro head, walking on, followed by Stephen, and mirthfully he told the shadows, souls of men. Oh, the night in the Camden Hall, when the daughters of Erin had to lift their skirts to step over you as you lay in your mulberry-coloured, multicoloured, multitudinous vomit. The most innocent son of Erin, Stephen said, for whom they ever lifted them. About to pass through the doorway, feeling one behind, he stood aside. Part! The innocent moment is now. Where then? If Socrates leave his house today, if Judas go forth tonight, why? That lies in space which I in time must come to, ineluctably. My will, his will that fronts me, sees between. A man passed out between them, bowing, greeting. Good day again, Buck Mulligan said. The portico. Here I watch the birds for augury, Ingus of the birds. They go, they come. Last night I flew, easily flew. Men wondered, street of harlots after. A cream fruit melon he held to me. In, you will see. The wandering Jew, Buck Mulligan, whispered with clown's awe. Did you see his eye? He looked upon you to lust after you. I fear thee, ancient mariner. O Kinch, thou art in peril. Get thee a breech pad. Manor of Oxenford. Day. Wheelbarrow sun over Archer Bridge. A dark back went before them. Step of pard, down, out by the gateway, under portcullis barbs. They followed. Offend me still, speak on. Kind air defined the coins of houses in Kildare Street. No birds. Frail from the housetops, 2 plumes of smoke ascended, plumbing, and in a flow of softness, softly were blown. Cease to strive. Peace of the druid priests of Cymbeline. Hierophantic, from wide earth an altar. Laud we the gods, and let our crooked smokes climb to their nostrils from our blessed altars.
"2:55 p.m. Yes, they were from Belvedere. The Superior, the Very Reverend John Conmee, S.J., reset his smooth watch in his interior pocket as he came down the presbytery steps. 5 to 3. Just nice time to walk to Artane. What was that boy's name again? Dignum, yes. Very dignum et iustum est. Brother Swan was the person to see. Mr. Cunningham's letter, yes. Oblige him if possible. Good practical Catholic. Useful at mission time. A one-legged sailor, swinging himself onward by lazy jerks of his crutches, growled some notes. He jerked short before the convent of the Sisters of Charity and held out a peaked cap for alms towards the Very Reverend John Conmee, S.J. Father Conmee blessed him. In the sun for his purse held, he knew, 1 silver coin, crown. Father Conmee crossed to Mountjoy Square. He thought, but not for long, of soldiers and sailors whose legs had been shot off by cannonballs, ending their days in some pauper ward, and of Cardinal Wolsey's words, "If I had served my God as I have served my King, he would not have abandoned me in my old days." He walked by the tree shade of sunny winking leaves, and towards him come the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, MP. "Very well indeed, Father. And you, Father?" Father Conmee was wonderfully well indeed. He would go to Buxton probably for the waters. And our boys, were they getting on well at Belvedere? Was that so? Father Conmee was very glad indeed to hear that. And Mr. Sheehy himself, still in London? The house was still sitting, to be sure it was. Beautiful weather it was, delightful indeed. Yes, it was very probable that Father Bernard Vaughan would come again to preach. Oh yes, a very great success. A wonderful man, really. Father Conmee was very glad to see the wife of Mr. David Sheehy, MP, looking so well, and he begged to be remembered to Mr. David Sheehy, MP. Yes, he would certainly call. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Sheehy." Father Conmee doffed his silk hat as he took leave at the jet beads of her mantilla ink shining in the sun, and smiled yet again in going. He had cleaned his teeth, he knew, with arcanut paste. Father Conmee walked, and, walking, smiled, for he thought on Father Bernard Vaughan's droll eyes and cockney voice. "Pilot, why don't you hold back that owling mob?" A zealous man, however. Really, he was, and really did great good in his own way. Beyond a doubt. He loved Ireland, he said, and he loved the Irish. Of good family too, one would think. Welsh, were they not? Oh, lest he forget, that letter to Father Provincial. Father Conmee strooped 3 little schoolboys at the corner of Mountjoy Square. Yes, they were from Belvedere, the little house. Aha. And were they good boys at school? Oh, that was very good now. And what was his name? Jack Showan. And his name? Ger Gallagher. And the other little man? His name was Brunny Lynham. Oh, that was a very nice name to have. Father Conmee gave a letter from his breast to Master Brunny Lynham and pointed to the red pillar box at the corner of Fitzgibbon Street. But mind you don't post yourself into the box, little man, he said. The boys six-eyed Father Conmee and laughed. Oh, sir. Well, let me see if you can post a letter, Father Conmee said. Master Brunny Lynham ran across the road and put Father Conmee's letter to the Father Provincial into the mouth of the bright red letterbox. Father Conmee smiled and nodded and smiled and walked along Mountjoy Square east. Mr. Dennis J. McGeaney, professor of dancing, etc., in silk hat, slate frock coat, with silk facings, white kerchief tie, tight lavender trousers, canary gloves and pointed patent boots, walking with grave deportment, most respectively took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell at the corner of Dignam's Court. Was that not Mrs. McGuinness? Mrs. McGuinness, stately, silver-haired, bowed to Father Conmee from the farther footpath along which she sailed, and Father Conmee smiled and saluted. How did she do? A fine carriage she had, like Mary's Queen of Scots something. And to think that she was a pawnbroker, well now, such a, what should he say, such a queenly mien. Father Conmee walked down Great Charles Street and glanced at the shut-up Free Church on his left. The Reverend T.R. Green, B.A., will, D.V., speak. The incumbent, they called him. He felt it incumbent on him to say a few words. But one should be charitable, invincible ignorance. They acted according to their lights. Father Conmee turned the corner and walked along the North Circular Road. It was a wonder that there was not a tram line in such an important thoroughfare. Surely there ought to be. A band of satchel schoolboys crossed from Richmond Street. All raised untidy caps. Father Conmee greeted them more than once benignly. Christian brother boys. Father Conmee smelled incense on his right as he walked, St. Joseph's Church, Portland Row, for aged and virtuous females. Father Conmee raised his hat to the Blessed Sacrament, virtuous, but occasionally they were also bad-tempered. Near Aldborough House, Father Conmee thought of that spendthrift nobleman, and now it was an office or something. Father Conmee began to walk along the North Strand Road and was saluted by Mr. William Gallagher, who stood in the doorway of his shop. Father Conmee saluted Mr. William Gallagher and perceived the odours that came from bacon flitches and ample cools of butter. He passed Grogan's, the tobacconist against which newspaper boards leaned, and told of a dreadful catastrophe in New York. In America, these things were continually happening. Unfortunate people to die like that, unprepared. Still, an act of perfect contrition. Father Conmee went by Daniel Bergen's public house, against the window of which 2 unlabouring men lounged. They saluted him and were saluted. Father Conmee passed H.G. O'Neill's funeral establishment, where Coney Kelleher totted figures in the daybook while he chewed a blade of hay. A constable on his beat saluted Father Conmee, and Father Conmee saluted the constable. In Youksters, the pork butchers, Father Conmee observed pigs' puddings, white and black and red, lying neatly curled in tubes. Moored under the trees of Charleville Mall, Father Conmee saw a turf barge, a tow horse with pendant head, a bargeman with a hat of dirty straw seated amidships, smoking and staring at a branch of poplar above him. It was idyllic, and Father Conmee reflected on the providence of the Creator, who had made turf to be in bogs where men might dig it out and bring it to town and hamlet to make fires in the houses of poor people. On Newcomen Bridge, the very Reverend John Conmee, S.J., of St. Francis Xavier's Church, Upper Gardiner Street, stepped onto an outward-bound tram. Off an inward-bound tram stepped the Reverend Nicholas Dudley, C.C., of St. Agatha's Church, North William Street, onto Newcomen Bridge. At Newcomen Bridge, Father Conmee stepped into an outward-bound tram, for he disliked to traverse on foot the dingy way past Mud Island. Father Conmee sat in a corner of the tramcar, a blue ticket tucked with care in the eye of one plump kid glove, while 4 shillings, a sixpence and 5 pennies shooted from his other plump glove palm into his purse. Passing the Ivy Church, he reflected that the ticket inspector usually made his visit when one had carelessly thrown away the ticket. The solemnity of the occupants of the car seemed to Father Conmee excessive for a journey so short and cheap, and Father Conmee liked cheerful decorum.
It was a peaceful day. The gentleman with the glasses opposite Father Conmee had finished explaining and looked down. His wife, Father Conmee supposed. A tiny yawn opened the mouth of the wife of the gentleman with the glasses. She raised her small gloved fist, yawned ever so gently, tip-tapping her small gloved fist on her opening mouth, and smiled tinily, sweetly. Father Conmee perceived her perfume in the car. He perceived also that the awkward man at the other side of her was sitting on the edge of the seat. Father Conmee, at the altar rails, placed the host with difficulty in the mouth of the awkward old man who had the shaky head. At Annesley Bridge, the tram halted, and when it was about to go, the old woman rose suddenly from her place to alight. The conductor pulled the bell strap to stay the car for her. She passed out with her basket and a market net, and Father Conmee saw the conductor help her and her net and basket down. And Father Conmee thought that, as she had nearly passed the end of the penny fare, she was one of those good souls who had always to be told twice, "Bless you, my child," and that they had been absolved, "Pray for me." But they had so many worries in life, so many cares, poor creatures. From the hoardings, Mr. Eugene Stratton grinned with thick nigger lips at Father Conmee. Father Conmee thought of the souls of black and brown and yellow men, and of his sermon of St. Peter Claver, S.J., and the African mission, and of the propagation of the faith, and of the millions of black and brown and yellow souls that had not received the baptism of water when their last hour came like a thief in the night. That book by the Belgian Jesuit, Le Nombre des Élus, seemed to Father Conmee a reasonable plea. Those were millions of human souls created by God in his own likeness, to whom the faith had not, D.V., been brought. But they were God's souls created by God. It seemed to Father Conmee a pity that they should all be lost, a waste, if one might say. At the Hoath Road stop, Father Conmee alighted, was saluted by the conductor, and saluted in his turn. The Malahide Road was quiet. It pleased Father Conmee, road and name. The joy bells were ringing in gay Malahide. Lord Talbot de Malahide, immediate hereditary Lord Admiral of Malahide, and in the seas adjoining. Then came the call to arms, and she was maid, wife, and widow in one day. Those were old worldish days, loyal times in joyous townlands, old times in the barony. Father Conmee, walking, thought of his little book, Old Times in the Barony, and of the book that might be written about Jesuit houses, and of Mary Rochfort, daughter of Lord Molesworth, first Countess of Belvedere. A listless lady, no more young, walked alone the shore in Loch Ennell. Mary, first Countess of Belvedere, listlessly walking in the evening, not startled when an otter plunged. Who could know the truth? Not the jealous Lord Belvedere, and not her confessor, if she had not committed adultery fully. Equilatio seminis inter vas naturale mulieres, with her husband's brother? She would half confess it. She had not all sinned as women did. Only God knew, and she, and he, her husband's brother. Father Conmee thought of that tyrannous incontinence needed, however, for man's race on earth, and of the ways of God, which were not our ways. Don John Conmee walked and moved in times of yore. He was humane and honored there. He bore in mind secrets confessed, and he smiled at smiling noble faces in a beeswaxed drawing room, sealed with fruit clusters. And the hands of a bride and of a bridegroom, noble to noble, were impalmed by Don John Conmee. It was a charming day. The lich gate of a field showed Father Conmee breadths of cabbages, curtsying to him with ample underleaves. The sky showed him a flock of small white clouds going slowly down the wind. Moutonné, the French said, a homely and just word. Father Conmee, reading his office, watched a flock of muttoning clouds over Rathcoffey. His thin-socked ankles were tickled by the stubble of Clongo's field. He walked there, reading in the evening, and heard the cries of the boys' lines at their play. Young cries in the quiet evening. He was their rector. His reign was mild. Father Conmee drew off his gloves and took his red-edged breviary out. An ivory bookmark told him the page. Nons. He should have read that before lunch, but Lady Maxwell had come. Father Conmee read in secret Pater and Ave and crossed his breast. Deus in Edutorium. He walked calmly and read mutely the nones, walking and reading, till he came to rest in Beati Immaculati Principium Vorbium Turium Veritas in Eternum Omnia Educia Justitiae Tuae. A flushed young man came from a gap of a hedge, and after him came a young woman with wild nodding daisies in her hand. The young man raised his hat abruptly. The young woman abruptly bent down, and with slow care detached from her light skirt a clinging twig.
Father Conmee blessed both gravely and turned the tin page of his breviary. Sin. Principe perscuti sunt me gratis, et verbis tuis formidavit cormeum. Corny Kelleher closed his long day book and glanced with his drooping eye at a pine coffin lid sentryed in a corner. He pulled himself erect, went to it, and spinning it on its axle, viewed its shape and brass furnishings. Chewing his blade of hay, he laid the coffin lid by and came to the doorway. There he tilted his hat brim to give shade to his eyes, and leaned against the door-case, looking idly out. Father John Conmee stepped into the Dolly Mounts tram on Newcomen Bridge. Corny Kelleher locked his large-footed boots and gazed, his head down-tilted, chewing his blade of hay. Constable 57C, on his beat, stood to pass the time of day. "That's a fine day, Mr. Kelleher." "Eh," Corny Kelleher said. "It's very close," the constable said. Corny Kelleher spat a silent jet of hay juice arching from his mouth while a generous white arm from a window in Eccles Street flung forth a coin. "What's the best news?" he asked. "I seen that particular party last evening," the constable said with bated breath. A one-legged sailor crutched himself round McConnell's corner, skirting Rabiotti's ice cream car, and jerked himself up Eccles Street. Towards Larry O'Rourke in shirt sleeves in his doorway, he growled unamiably, "For England." He swung himself violently forward past Katie and Body Daedalus, halted and growled, "Home and beauty." J.J. O'Molloy's white careworn face was told that Mr. Lambert was in the warehouse with a visitor. A stout lady stopped, took a copper coin from her purse, and dropped it into the cap held out to her. The sailor grumbled thanks and glanced sourly at the unheeding windows, sank his head and swung himself forward 4 strides. He halted and growled angrily, "For England." 2 barefoot urchins, sucking long liquorized laces, halted near him, gaping at his stump with their yellow slobbered mouths. He swung himself forward in vigorous jerks, halted, lifted his head towards a window and bayed deeply, "Home and beauty." The gay sweet chirping, whistling within went on a bar or two, ceased. The blind of the window was drawn aside. A cart, unfurnished apartments slipped from the sash and fell. A plump, bare, generous arm shone, was seen, held forth from a white petticoat bodice and taut straps. A woman's hand flung forth a coin over the aerial railings. It fell on the path. One of the urchins ran to it, picked it up and dropped it into the minstrel's cap, saying, "There, sir." Thanks for listening. Now we're moving on to Moscow.